Well, it's finally official. The worst kept secret in Australian football has been confirmed. Joe Montemurro has been named the 15th head coach of the Matildas after what interim CEO Heather Garriock described as a worldwide search. He signed the contract literally 2 days ago on the 31st of May, and his contract runs through to the 2028 Olympic Games. Lockie, we've been basically expecting this for at least 3 months, but the conversation's been going on much longer, and, it's finally happened.
Yeah, it's finally happened. The use of the phrase worldwide search was absolutely true probably 8 or 9 months ago. It feels like they've been locked in on their target for quite some time now. Obviously, waiting for Joe to finish his commitments at Olympic Lyon for the end of the season over there in Europe, and that time has finally come. And as you say, everything has happened rather quickly since then. Only signed the contract 2 days ago, but he's in. The contract has been signed, and he's there for the future of the Matildas. Obviously, a massive tournament coming up with a home Asian Cup, but then a World Cup and Olympic Games to come after that as well. So they finally got him in, which is great, and hopefully now we can start to move forward.
Yeah, so in his initial press conference earlier today, he talked about the professionalism of Football Australia and the way they approached the situation. They went about it the right way, going through his agent, not approaching him directly. All these little conversations here and there, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Just a real professional approach is how Montemurro described it from Football Australia. But, I mean, the big question does have to be asked, Lockie. They could have had him 12 months ago. And I've said this before, what was stopping them from going, because it was clear since November of 2023 that the relationship with Tony Gustafsson as coach of the Matildas was careening towards its end at the end of the Olympics. We kept on hearing reports that he was after this job in Sweden, he was after that job in Sweden, and it's just ended up in a situation where he did end up leaving, and 10 months have gone by since that's happened with Tom Samani as the interim coach. And this is no knock on Tom Samani. I think he's done a fantastic job, and he rightfully, deserves his place. With 150 games in charge of the Matildas, he'll forever be a legend of Australian football. But there was no need for this to happen. It literally, unless there was a performance bonus in Gustafsson's contract that they couldn't get out of, is there no reason they couldn't have signed the contract last year and gone, look, you'll take over effective from this date, and away we go, because that's exactly what Gustafsson's done right now. Is he's literally the coach in waiting for Sweden's women's national team. I believe it takes place at the end of the Euros. There's no reason that the FA couldn't have done that with Joe, surely.
Yeah, that is based off the one crucial assumption that they decided that Joe is the person they wanted to coach the Matildas, which from what we understand probably hadn't quite happened at that point. If they knew that Montemurro was who they wanted to coach, then yes, leaving Gustafsson to after the Olympics when his contract expired and then allowing Joe to sign for Lyon, that is definitely a mistake. And even if he was probably one of the top considerations, then they probably should have been more alert to that situation and been able to manage things a little bit better. And I was quite disappointed actually with Heather Garrick's response to one of the questions, asking if she thought it was a misstep that they didn't push harder for Joe 10 months ago. And she seemed to imply that, Joe going away and winning a French championship was, a valuable reason to have waited an extra 10 months to get a Matildas coach in, which is just completely untrue. The time away is what it was. They had to wait for the end of the season, as you say, do things in the professional manner after they got themselves caught in this situation. So it was clearly suboptimal. There's no point in pretending any differently. But again, we do have to ask these questions, and that'll be a lot of conversation in the next few days for sure, and rightfully so. But hopefully, as this comes in now, that we can start to turn our attention towards that Asian Cup, because talking too much about this after the next couple of days and prolonging this storyline isn't going to help the Matildas.
No, it's not. And I find it interesting that you bring up that line, because as I was watching the press conference, it literally, hearing that literally made me want to start ripping my hair out. Lyon have won 18 of the last 19 titles. They lost, I think it was 2020, 2021 to PSG by a single point. But it literally, they hand the trophy to Lyon like it's candy, right? That is a minimum expectation at Lyon. A Lyon manager's job is to win the Champions League, and everything else is supposed to be a given. Getting knocked out of the Coup de France is a sackable offense for a Lyon coach because it's just expected they'll win that. And then, with that misstep idea as well, it was literally, Gary Ock re-emphasised the point of respect being important for Football Australia, and with Gustafsson taking the Matildas to the games to win a medal, she said she didn't think it was a missed opportunity and that everything happens for a reason. And I mean, we kind of have to take it at face value, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're just trying to put a positive mindset on things, which, I don't know. As someone who, the subtext of this whole press conference is that she is essentially auditioning for the full-time CEO role, right? Which we don't need to get into today, but people can present it however they want. It was clearly a missed opportunity to not get Joe in, and unfortunately now he's only going to have, what is it? We're like 8-9 months away now from the Asian Cup. So that is limited preparation time. It's a lack of competitive football, which he could have had at the Olympic Games and somewhat at the She Believes Cup. But there is still time. And this Matildas team, we know they can gather momentum in a very unique way that not many other sporting teams can in Australia or around the world. And so hopefully what we see is that swell of support and momentum, and we're going to have a lot of games on home soil before that time, I'm sure, and we'll get to see what a Joe Montemurro and Matilda side looks like, and hopefully that's one that can go very deep in the Asian Cup.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest question, is how long is it going to take Montemurro to embed his philosophies? He talked about being a very proactive coach. He said that the football's not going to look too dissimilar to what was played under his time at Arsenal, under his time at Juventus, and under his time at Lyon. It's going to be a very attacking style of football. It's going to be a very controlling style of football. They want to control the ball, control the game with and without the ball. But I mean, that's the sort of thing that can take time, particularly trying to implement it with a side that you don't necessarily get to see on a regular basis. And I did the math a couple of months ago, and I think we might be at the stage now where he's looking at single digits in terms of games actually available and how many of those games are going to be against the quality opposition that we're going to need to get past to win an Asian Cup. Like the South Korea games in April would have presented themselves as a perfect opportunity. The game against Japan at the She Believes Cup would have presented itself a perfect opportunity, and now his first games in charge are going to be against Slovenia and Panama. And this is not to be disrespectful to either of those two nations, but the results conceivably should be Matilda's wins. And so it does present a good opportunity to sort of embed the philosophies that they'll get to work on a little bit throughout training. But I mean, it's not competitive football. And ultimately, when we're looking at the quarterfinals or the semifinals of the Asian Cup, it's a knockout tournament, everything's on the line. I can't see how 360 minutes against Slovenia and Panama is going to help, embed those philosophies, because they're not going to be high pressure situations.
No, I do think it is okay for this very point in time. With a new coach coming in, he's obviously going to want him to impart his philosophy on the style of play, and to do that against, look, nominally, obviously football is a funny game, anything can happen, but theoretically lower ranked opposition, then that might not be a bad thing. But then, more than ever probably in the history of Australian national teams, deciding the fixtures and scheduling the games going into a major tournament is going to be a significantly important piece of the puzzle when it comes to success at the Asian Cup. Having that runway up to test yourself against good, solid Asian opposition, which we've learnt from playing international football over the last 4 years, can be very different when you're taking on South American and European football. And we need to be prepared for that challenge. And it's a challenge that the Matildas didn't quite successfully fulfill at the last Asian Cup. So planning these games and figuring out what windows we have, and scheduling that kind of development, and figuring out what that path looks like, because it is, as we say, the advantage of it only being 7-8 months is that you can plan that out with a lot of detail, and you can kind of be very prescriptive in how you want to develop a team. So hopefully they have the right people in the right places to coordinate these kind of games, and by the time we do get to the start of that Asian Cup, we'll be ready.
One can only hope. And Montemurro also spoke about how he felt that it was the right time, and it was the right decision to take on the role, and that he assessed a few things, and he talked about it being an exciting cycle for the Matildas with the Asian Cup on home soil, the World Cup in Brazil, and then the Olympic Games. The opportunity was too good, as he put it, and also he said there was something that was telling him that it was time that was inside of him, and in which case, again, I not to try to harp on that point, but I have to ask the question: was it not the right time 12 months ago?
Look, when you have a club of Lyon's reputation in the women's game, I mean, it'd be very hard to say no. They're obviously considered one of the absolute powerhouses in women's football. So, look, representing your country is a big thing, and he clearly has wanted to do that, and he seems quite motivated by that idea. But being able to tick off for him personally to manage at a club like Lyon, of course, he's been at Arsenal, he's been at Juventus, and he's won lots of trophies. But Lyon is that massive club. Like, they're literally in the top 2-3 in the world that you want for the women's game. So I don't know. It's very hard to say no to that. If he knew he had Lyon coming, and obviously he signed his 2-year contract, so we can't speak to his motivations about thinking about getting the Matildas role after that. But that is pretty hard to turn down.
Yeah, I mean, it's not every day a club of Lyon's quality comes knocking, and we'll get into that a lot more on the Dubcast this week, part of the Roundball Australia podcast network with myself and Burke. And then the last thing I want to talk about today, Lockie, is he thanked Tom Samani in his press conference, and the idea of it being a non-qualifying year and the difficulties that presents. This is, the 1 year in the 4-year cycle where, the Matildas don't play any sort of tournament football. But the process that Tommy's undergone, some of the players that he's brought through, the gems he's unearthed, and we know that Tom Samani does love a cheeky Matildas cap, and to use that line again, he hands them out like candy at times. It's is Joe Montemurro the right coach to lead the Matildas to the Asian Cup, which he said that he wants to win the tournament and thinks it's an achievable goal?
I think he's probably the best appointment that Football Australia could have got. And that's a point that needs to be made clear as well. Yes, obviously the process has been excruciating at times, but is there a better, more qualified coach to lead specifically Australia to a major tournament? I don't think there's probably a single name that is above Joe Montemurro on that list, and that's really exciting, right? And Tom Samani, you're right, has to be given a huge amount of credit. He's come in an extremely difficult position. It'd be really, really difficult to motivate those players, especially when we were coming out of the She Believes Cup and the motivation just seemed lost, and the Matildas had their identity stripped away a little bit. And we've seen some of that coming back. And you're right, he's given a lot of caps out, but look at how successful they've been. I mean, just look at Carly Johnson on Friday night, right? Like, what an awesome story. And it's given Joe a lot to work with. And he did mention in that press conference about the fact that he has been contracted to Lyon, of course, right? He was in a Champions League semi-final, so that was where his responsibilities are. But now he's signed on, and when this window comes to a close and there's a little bit of a break before that next series, well, that's going to be the time to deep dive into all those fixtures that have been played in the last 12 months and get into detail on some of those players and start to put together a plan. And because of the way that Samani has managed this last little period, Montemurro has a lot to work with, and he already has those first few steps of developing, not developing maybe, but just kind of understanding the squad and the depth that lies there. Tom Samani should be praised for what he's done. And again, Montemurro, as a solid appointment, we're looking at this day specifically, really, really good news for Australian football.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But that will do for this little chat on Joe Montemurro's appointment. We'll get into much more detail this week on the Dubcast, part of the Roundball Australia podcast network, with myself and Burke, where we'll also wrap up the Matildas 2 games against Argentina, including, as you mentioned, Carly Johnson's goal on debut on Friday night. It's hard to believe 12 months ago she was playing in the NPL Women's New South Wales for Manly United. Just goes to show that, the NPL New South Wales is the best women's NPL in the country.
Well, I take that and I raise you with the fact that when Joe Montemurro coaches against Slovenia, there will be 2 former NPL Victoria coaches on either side of that dugout.
Yeah. My name is Poletti. Lockie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Cheers, Bloody.
And just remember, if you like this and you want to see more of it, hit that subscribe button. Remember to like and share so we can continue to grow the podcast and, give a bigger platform to talk about Australian women's football in this country. But we'll be back on Wednesday to chat all things Australian women's football.